As 2024 comes to a close, SoFi has had a terrific year so far. We have the last week of trading coming up next week, and so far the stock is up 59% year to date. And so in this video, I wanted to do a full breakdown, a recap of all the news pieces we've seen over this year, along with some supporting news and what was going on through that period. Because in these videos, you can really see the pace of innovation and product development at a company like SoFi. There's going to be a lot to cover in this video, so let's jump right in. Now, I initially released this in the form of a tweet thread, and I want to run through that tweet thread and just add some more details around this time period. So I'm just going to share my screen right now, and we're going to do this live in real time. So like I promised, this is going to be a long thread. I posted this on X earlier today. I'm going to tag it in the description. And it starts off by saying that I've covered every move that SoFi has made over the past couple of years. I've done hundreds of individual videos on YouTube, and I've also had multiple hundreds of posts on X about SoFi. And in this post, I'm going to have a monthly breakdown with all the major headlines and also, more importantly, the supporting news, since I have all the news pieces broken down on a weekly basis in my files. And I was just combing through all of those earlier today. So this is the ticker of SoFi throughout the year. And as we can see, it's gone up quite a bit. It spent most of the year in the $6 range and $7 range, and currently it is around $15.50. We start off with January 2024, where in the beginning of the year, immediately we kicked off 2024 with a downgrade by one of our favorite analysts, Michael Perito at KBW. He downgraded SoFi to underperform, and I remember this because the stock fell immediately 14% to $6.50, even though in the subsequent days we broke out this analyst note and we explained why the downgrade was unjustified and why they were using some lagging indicators and judging SoFi in an apples to oranges way with the JP Morgans of the world. Also in January, we had SoFi Invest offering 2% match on IRA contributions, which was an increase from the 1% match they offered in 2023. SoFi won 3 awards at NerdWallet's Best of Awards for checking, overdraft fee avoidance, and also personal loans in January. SoFi did lay off 4% of the workforce. This was confirmed by Investor Relations on X after some digging. And during this period, Tanner and I hopped on a live stream. We actually did some sleuthing on LinkedIn and also on Blind, where employees were posting that they were looking for jobs because they just got laid off by SoFi. SoFi had a reduction in force. And later, this was confirmed by Investor Relations on X. In January, again, SoFi launched Small Business Financing Marketplace. They launched the BrightSpring IPO through SoFi Invest. Our favorite analyst, Dan Dolev at Mizuho, cut his SoFi price target to $12, down from $15, although he maintained his buy rating. SoFi at Work entered into a partnership with Chipotle for student loan retirement matching programs. And we've talked about this on most of these points. I have videos going back through the year. SoFi appointed Dana Green to the board of directors just shortly before they reported their financial results at the end of January. They also began offering alternative investments. You'll remember that at the end of December in 2023, we had rumblings that SpaceX was going to be offered through SoFi. Cathie Wood's ARK Venture Fund was previously only offered at one other institution. This headline is pulled straight from their investor relations page, where they did offer alternative investment, including ARK Venture Fund, which has SpaceX. It also has Stripe. It also has a bunch of other pre-IPO companies. And now the SoFi investor base would be having access to all of these investments. Finally, SoFi ended off January 2024 by reporting their fourth quarter and their full year 2023 results. They also announced 2024 guidance, but more importantly, they announced 2026 outlook of 55 to 80 cents EPS. And this was something that I think set the stage for a lot of the projections for growth that many analysts, including myself, have for the future years. So pretty busy January. Moving on to February, we had SoFi appointing a new chief risk officer in Arun Pinto. Pinto had been previously with JP Morgan for over a decade. He'd been with Wells Fargo most recently before replacing Aaron Webster as a new chief risk officer at SoFi. But perhaps the biggest news in February was SoFi becoming the official bank of the NBA, the NBA G League, and USA Basketball. And this doesn't only include the primetime coverage of NBA, it also included a partnership with Jason Tatum And it also included the SoFi NBA play-in tournament, which was hosted later on that year. Moving on, SoFi became the 75th largest bank by assets with 24 billion assets under management. Kathy Wood interviewed SoFi on her channel. They talked about the ARK Venture Fund. They talked about a whole bunch of other stuff because at this time, Kathy was accumulating SoFi. If you remember, this was at the beginning of the year. She did end up selling quite a bit of SoFi towards the later half of the year, but at this point, she was in heavy accumulation mode. SoFi was around $6.50, $7 around this time in February of 2024. To cap off February, SoFi's CFO, Chris Lapointe, participated in a UBS Fireside Conference. And in this conference, he hinted that SoFi is in partnership with a top 5 US bank, or at least that they'd completed a proof of concept with a top 5 US bank, to which we all speculated that this could be Citibank. Moving on to March of 2024, Galileo expands their collaboration with the Bancorp to offer real-time payments through the clearinghouse. Now, Galileo had quite a number of announcements. Actually, would have been much more than this. I cherry-picked some Galileo announcements to include into this post, although this is definitely not exhaustive of all the Galileo announcements because Galileo is above and beyond in terms of the communication for PR, but also in terms of their product development. They release new press releases like every single week, and so I had to really be selective around what I included. Now, moving on, possibly the biggest news that we got in March was the $750 million convertible senior note offering that SoFi introduced due in 2029, and the capped call transaction, which we spoke at length about around SoFi retiring some debt and offering new notes in 2029. The former chief risk officer, Aaron Webster, who was essentially demoted from SoFi in January, he left the company to go join PayPal in March. Anthony Noto then went on CNBC Mad Money with Jim Cramer to explain the 2029 senior notes and why this was an opportune time to do this deal and why it made sense for SoFi. And he gave a really good explanation here because they essentially were forced their hand into doing that deal at that time. And to make matters worse, from an executive leadership change perspective, later on in that month, SoFi Bank president Chad Borton resigned. He later joined Equifax in May, but the resignation note was something like he wanted more time to spend with his family or something to that effect. Now, you might ask me, okay, Tevis, why were all these executives resigning in May? It's because it has to do with their stock options. A lot of their stock options came to vest shortly before, and shortly after, a couple of weeks after, you had several executives handing in their resignation because they were essentially waiting for their shares to vest, and then they were ready to go after that. Now, possibly the biggest event that happened in March, aside from the $750 million convertible senior notes, was actually Robinhood announcing the Robinhood Gold Card. And this was relevant because this was a whole new offering that was much more competitive in the credit card space. And a lot of people, myself included, were urging SoFi to have a response ready for their own credit cards. Also at this time, we had a peak in short interest at a record 23% short interest, over 190 million shares sold short. Moving on now to April, we had KBW actually upgrade SoFi to market perform. And this was something that irritated not only myself, but a lot of other people covering the stock, Tanner, Chris, DDI Investing. The reason why is because the downgrade that came in January saw the stock fall 14%. And then in April, again, they went ahead and upgraded the stock to market perform back to their $7.50 price target they had before. And so it was essentially a nothing burger. But the reason is because the stock saw such a disproportionate drop on the way down, then it did a boost on the way up. And that's something that speaks to the overall sentiment that SoFi had around that time. Needham also initiated SoFi with a $10 price target. SoFi responded, in my opinion, to Robinhood's announcement by boosting their own credit card benefits and their own referral bonuses to credit cards. They partnered with the National Association of Realtors for SoFi at Work. They also had another partnership with golfer Wyndham Clark, and they were recognized as a top 5 bank in the Forbes 2024 World's Best Bank report. This is actually quite interesting because you have over 100 banks here, and SoFi was recognized as a top 5 US bank, even though they have such a small market cap in comparison. Although this Forbes report had a much more granular way of judging user satisfaction at these different banks. They had many different categories, and they added up the scores at the end. So SoFi, across all of those categories, including that brand awareness, landed in the top 5, which was a really big deal. Citibank increased their price target to 11. Deutsche Bank increased it to 12. And later on that month, at the end of April, SoFi reported Q1 net revenue of $645 million and net income of $88 million. marking the second consecutive quarter of GAAP profitability. Moving on, in May, we had the 2024 annual meeting of stockholders and SoFi receiving a grant for machine learning fairness metrics and risk scoring. So this is really helping them with their models and essentially assessing risk accordingly. Later on in the month, they had a securitization deal for $350 million of personal loan securitization with PGIM. So this is essentially like the loan platform business in play, the early innings of the loan platform business. They announced support for Zelle transactions. Zelle is one of the most requested features for SoFi for many, many years. And so I'm going to go ahead and say that this was possibly the biggest news that SoFi had in May. Although it could be arguable because SoFi's seventh largest shareholder, Two Sigma Capital, liquidated 14.6 million shares, their entire SoFi position in May. Short interest dropped to 17%, which is also still very, very high. And you're going to see a trend of a lot of these big institutions liquidating their position all throughout the year. So Two Sigma is the first. So Two Sigma is really the first, but you had a couple of others in the following months. So let's move on now to June, where SoFi appointed Steven Simcock as general counsel. CFO Chris Lapointe participated in the Mizuho fireside chat. And as you'll have it, the QIA, the Qatar Investment Authority, the fourth largest SoFi shareholder, just 1 month later, liquidated their entire position, 19.8 million shares of SoFi. So you'll probably be asking, why this was the case that many of these institutions were liquidating their position. And I've highlighted this in previous videos in the past. There's many different reasons why these companies would be liquidating their position. And a lot of these people are companies that have made private investments in the SoFi back in 2017, in the case of QIA, for example. And maybe they want to diversify, or maybe they saw better avenues for their money, although SoFi did have a pretty big rally towards the end of the year. So they probably lost out on a lot of those opportunities. Moving on to July of 2024, of course, this is the month that we had the earnings. SoFi ramped up credit card marketing and promotions, which is essentially why I included the Robinhood Gold announcement back in, I think, February or March. SoFi has done quite a bit for credit cards this year, and you see a gradual progression upwards in terms of credit cards, not only in the referral bonuses and the actual benefits that the credit card provides, but also introducing new products and also marketing and promotions. Anthony Noto came on CNBC hinting at his policy preferences. So he was saying basically that SoFi would benefit much more from a Republican administration than a Democrat one when he was pressed on the question. Short interest increased to 18%. And look at this, the usual suspects, KBW, who has already changed their price target twice this year, went ahead and lowered their price target again on SoFi, including Barclays, who lowered their price target as well. So you're seeing that KBW lowered their price target in January, increased it in April, lowered it again in July. And you're thinking, what the hell is going on here? Can these guys make up their mind? But at the end of July, SoFi reported their Q2 numbers, net revenue of $599 million and net income of $17 million, marking the third consecutive GAAP profitability quarter. And as you can see, we're inching our way towards that 4 quarters of consecutive GAAP profitability. In addition to this, the same day that they reported their earnings, they also released a press release on 2 new pilot credit cards, which sort of makes sense because of how much marketing and promotions they were doing all throughout the month leading up into earnings. The Everyday Cash Rewards card and the SoFi Essentials card, they basically highlighted that these are in a pilot program, that they're testing these out and that they're not fully launched yet, but this is something that they're working on behind the scenes. Now, moving on to August, SoFi hit a 52-week low at $6.01, just mere days after the Q2 earnings report. Granted that SoFi has triple beat on every single earnings report thus far. The 3 that they reported in 2024 was triple beat, and triple beat again. And yet they hit a 52-week low at $6. As the month went on, SoFi did recover from that bottom and actually finished off the month as high as $8.20. SoFi Invest became available for non-permanent residents in the US. SoFi launched their small business banking and financing options with Novo and with Amex. And actually, in the case of Amex, just a couple of weeks later, they went ahead and removed Amex as a potential partner. And we don't really know why they removed Amex. But if you go on the website right now, it'll only show you Novo. But for example, if I look at the screenshots from back then, you'll have the American Express option as well. So it seems like that option didn't work out as a partnership. And many people, myself included, critiqued SoFi with this approach to enter through a partnership because it shoots them in the foot later on down the line if they want to vertically integrate into this space in the future, because they might be cannibalizing future business by doing it through a partnership. SoFi became the 69th largest bank in the US by assets with $27 billion in assets in August. They lowered their APY on checking and savings to 4.5%. And the reason I highlight this is because this is the first time that they lowered it. They're going to lower it all throughout the remainder of the year. And the reason why is because at this point, the market is anticipating rate cuts from the Fed. And as a result of that, everybody lowered their APY. Galileo enhanced their B2B expense management with MasterCard Smart Data. That was, I think, the biggest Galileo news for August 2024. Moving on to September, Anthony Noto participated in the Goldman Sachs Fireside Chat. He announced Cash Coach and the expanded credit card offerings, highlighting some more details around what those offerings are going to be included and what they were looking at for the initial testing of those product offerings. Galileo launched instant account verification and machine learning risk scoring, and they also launched secured credit with dynamic funding. October was a huge month for SoFi. They launched the direct share platform for IPOs, powered by Primary Bid. They again lowered their API to 4.3%. They launched the 2 new credit cards out of their pilot program and available for the wider group, the Everyday Cash Rewards card and the SoFi Essentials card. They expanded their loan platform business with a $2 billion agreement with Fortress. They partnered with Venus Williams and Cameron Brink for yet and again another new campaign. So far this year, if you've been keeping track, you have Jason Tatum, you have Wyndham Clark, and now you have Venus Williams and Cameron Brink doubling and tripling down into their sports strategy. They expanded their partnership with Nova Credit for cash flow underwriting. And SoFi at last adopted Galileo's Cyberbank core for new commercial payment services. So they're vertically integrating even further. Moving on to November, SoFi's new robo-advisor platform expanded everyday investors' access to diversified asset classes. And you can see here the full experience. Anthony Noto actually went ahead and posted this on his X. You can see how this would work essentially. SoFi also had a partnership with BlackRock. They moved to the 67th largest bank in the US with $29 billion in assets. So just climbing the ranking slowly every quarter. The short interest plummeted to 13%, which is the lowest since January 12, 2024. Why did the short interest plummet? Because all throughout October and November, SoFi had a massive rally. And this rally started on mid-October when SoFi was trading for around $8 per share. And they went as high as $17.19, the 52-week high that they hit just last week. Now, moving on to December of 2024, the month we're currently in. Earlier this month, Chris Lapointe, SoFi's CFO, had a fireside chat at the UBS conference. Silver Lake, yet another huge institutional shareholder, SoFi's third largest shareholder, liquidated their entire position, 31.1 million shares. I mean, in the case of Silver Lake, it's more justifiable than QIA or 3 Sigma. The reason is because SoFi had a massive rally and Silver Lake might have been up on their position. And so they decide to book some of those profits. But in the case of QIA and also 3 Sigma, which sold when SoFi was in the $7 range, like that's a move that I don't understand as much as, Silver Lake, for example, who sold after a big rally. This just happened like last week. SoFi also expanded their access to alts through a partnership with Templum. So this is just more exposure to these alternative investment assets. They also mentioned the sole exposure to SpaceX as well, which a lot of people were creating buzz on X about. And actually, SoFi crossed the 10 million member milestone. They posted this as a press release last week. 10 million members, $1 billion in interest earned on savings, $9 billion in homes funded, so on and so forth. And this is kind of interesting because SoFi is essentially giving us a sneak peek of the member edition numbers that they're going to announce at the end of January when they report the next quarter earnings. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. I did a similar recap for 2023 where I essentially walked through every single month in 2023 what SoFi released. And I think from videos like this, you can really understand the pace of innovation that the company like this has. And also by looking backwards, you can understand how they set up future initiatives, because in January, they'll release something, and then in March, they'll build on that. And then in June, they'll build on that even more. And then in August, they'll build on that even further. And it's difficult to look at the puzzle pieces going forward. But when you do a yearly recap like this, you can very easily see the playbook laid out, which is why I wanted to make this post. I hope you enjoyed this video, and also congratulations to all the SoFi investors who held through 2024 on a fantastic, fantastic year. And like I said to my post, I'll just repeat it here. 2025 sets the company up to achieve some really great things, not only from an interest rate perspective, but also a lot of these initiatives that they started are now coming to fruition. So we'll see how that plays out. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to this channel for more. I'll see you in the next one.